Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lynn. Namaskar. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban blocks aid for Ukraine and warns that he can still halt Kyiv's accession to the EU after membership talks won the bloc's approval on Thursday. Finland to shut its entire border with Russia to stop inflow of asylum seekers. Kremlin says the planned defense pact between Finland and the US will lead to more tensions between Helsinki and Moscow. Oman's Sultan Haitham bin Tariq arrives in New Delhi on his first state visit to India. The visit is to strengthen bilateral ties. And the Philippines prepares for a potential conflict with China with plans to repel Chinese forces boarding Filipino vessels. And India thrash South Africa by 106 runs in the third T20 Cricket International in Johannesburg. They leveled the series 1-1. The skipper Surya Kumar Yadav rewrote history, and he hit his fourth century in T20 internationals. Israeli military recovered the bodies of 3 individuals on Friday, including 2 soldiers and 1 civilian. The victims have been identified as the 28-year-old Ilya Toledano and the 19-year-old soldier Nick Baiza, as well as Ron Schkerman. What's happened is that the military had not provided details on the circumstances of their deaths or the specific areas in Gaza where their bodies were recovered. The head of the UN's Gaza mission has warned that parts of Gaza are no longer habitable because of overcrowding and poor weather. Felipe Lazarini's third visit to the region since the recent fighting broke out revealed worsening conditions in Rafah. The UN warns of a humanitarian crisis. DD India correspondent Sally Peterson reports from New York.
UNRWA Commissioner General Felipe Lazzarini says things have gone from bad to worse in Gaza. He'd been staying in Rafah, in the south of the Strip, near the border with Egypt, a city he called the epicenter of displacement. According to the UN agency, nearly 1.9 million people, more than 85% of the population in Gaza, have been displaced since fighting began in early October. The city of Rafah has quadrupled its population, with people forced to sleep outside overcrowded UN warehouses. They've set up makeshift camps, with families battling heavy rain and cold weather as winter sets in. Lazzarini said everywhere you go, people are desperate, they're hungry, and they're terrified. Aid is still only trickling into the Strip. He said some people he met hadn't eaten in 3 days. That's leading to people stopping aid trucks, grabbing food and eating it on the spot. The UNRWA chief repeated calls for an uninterrupted flow of supplies into Gaza and for an immediate ceasefire. That's something the Secretary General of the UN is also pushing for. But Israel and its allies, including the United States, say a ceasefire will give Hamas time to regroup and plan its next attack. Israel also accuses Hamas of using civilians as human shields and storing weapons in or near schools, hospitals and mosques. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
Well, it's day 2 of the crucial EU summit in Brussels, where the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has warned that he could still halt the Ukraine accession to the European Union a day after the bloc had agreed, in fact, to open membership talks with Kyiv.
Hungary bears no responsibility for this. We can halt this process later on, and if needed, we will pull the brakes, and the ultimate decision will be made by the Hungarian parliament.
Orban failed to veto the launch of the accession talks on Thursday. However, He did block EU's $54 billion aid package to Ukraine. The EU will resume talks on the agreement early next year. Meanwhile, the bloc granted candidate status to Georgia.
With great pride and great joy, I congratulate you on the historic decision. Georgia has become a candidate country for EU membership. Congratulations to all. I want to congratulate every citizen on today's historic day. This is truly a victory for our country and our people.
On the second day of the EU summit in Brussels, the Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas expressed optimism about the ongoing talks for financial support to Ukraine following the historic decision to initiate membership talks with the war-torn country.
Ukraine is struggling in the military side, then we should also provide them political support, and this is the political support to say that we move on with the processes and Ukraine's future is in Europe. As I said before, we will reach an agreement on the financial aid. There was a clear political will. It was just 3 o'clock already, and it was clear that we are not reaching the solution yesterday night.
The Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, emphasized the necessity for additional funds for Ukraine and addressed concerns like tackling illegal immigration.
Essentially, yesterday we got agreement on talks opening up with Ukraine and Moldova and becoming full members of the EU, but we couldn't get agreement on revisions to the budget. So the extra money that we need for Ukraine, but also for other issues like cracking down on illegal immigration, we weren't able to agree the money for that, unfortunately. So it's going to require another meeting, most likely in the new year. Disappointing.
The Kremlin has said Ukraine's accession into the European Union is a remote prospect and could lead to destabilization of the EU. The Kremlin added that the EU's initiatives to discuss accession are just an expression of political support for Kyiv, and neither Ukraine nor Moldova match EU's strict criteria. Finland's interior minister will once again shut its border with Russia to stop the inflow of asylum seekers. The new border closure will begin on Friday at 1800 hours GMT and last for an entire month. Helsinki has accused Moscow of sending migrants to the crossings to retaliate against the decision to boost defense cooperation with the US, a charge that the Kremlin denies.
Tulo Suomen itärajalla on välittömästi jatkunut.
We have been able to state that illegal entry at Finland's eastern border continued immediately. The number of migrants increased rapidly and the phenomenon accelerated faster than estimated. Several dozen people had already arrived in Finland through the Vaalimaa and Nairala border crossings during the morning. The government has today convened an extra meeting to decide on complete closure of the eastern border crossing. The closure starts tomorrow, Friday 15 December at 8 p.m. and ends on 14 January 2024.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin said a planned defense pact between Finland and the United States will lead to further tensions between Helsinki and Moscow. The Kremlin added that Russia would regard the presence of NATO infrastructure near its borders as a threat. Finland became NATO's newest member this year and is also due to sign a defense cooperation agreement with the United States on Monday. The United States will have its presidential election next year with the Democrat incumbent Joe Biden seeking a re-election. He is likely to face the former president, the Republican nominee, Donald Trump. But Trump faces several legal challenges related to his previous election actions. DD India's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
2024 is expected to be a dramatic year for US politics, but perhaps not this dramatic. The rise of AI images like these, of events that never happened, could make separating fact from fiction even harder during this election year. But one thing that's beyond doubt, Donald Trump's upcoming trials have not lessened support among his voters.
It doesn't matter that he's charged. It doesn't matter what courts seem to say. His base is with him. And that base won't go away unless he's convicted. And even then, if he's convicted, who knows? We don't know. what will happen to his base.
The former president is facing 4 criminal trials this year. Charges include his alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 election results, which culminated in the January 6, 2021 attack on the US Capitol. Time in court will reduce time on the campaign trail, where he's vying to win the Republican Party nomination to challenge Joe Biden. State votes begin in mid-January, and polls already suggest Trump is comfortably ahead of the other Republican candidates.
There's probably a lot of discouragement among Trump's challengers. He's at 51%. Of course, that means half the people want somebody else, and so maybe somebody can rally some of these supporters, but that gets difficult here in the holiday season.
The state of the economy, jobs, immigration and abortion access are all expected to be key election issues. And the new battlefield in Gaza has created a political minefield for President Biden. The rising humanitarian crisis for Palestinians and Washington's unwavering support for Israel's military campaign has some progressive Democrats saying they can no longer support Biden. Josh Paul quit his job at the State Department in protest of the conflict and predicts it will hurt Biden at the ballot box.
I think it will cost them politically. I think there is a disconnect between where the majority of the American public are and where the administration is and where many in Congress are. And I think that these series of events have really crystallized that disconnect. That said, I don't know that it will lead to any change in the immediate term in terms of America's posture towards the provision of lethal arms to Israel.
Continued funding for Ukraine could also divide voters. Biden is pushing for billions of dollars in additional support, money many Republicans say should be spent at home rather than on a foreign conflict.
There's still a long while until November's presidential election, when a Biden-Trump rematch is expected. Before then, there'll be many months of partisan politics and courtroom drama. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
Elon Musk faces legal challenges from the U.S. Security and Exchange Commission over the Twitter takeover. They want him to testify regarding public statements and paperwork for the buyout. Caroline Malone of DD India sent us this report.
Another legal challenge for the world's richest man as a judge rules he has to testify again. The Security and Exchange Commission, the top US markets regulator, is looking into his $44 billion takeover of Twitter, now X. He first disclosed he'd purchased stock in the company in April 2022. He gave the SEC documents and then testified via video conference. They received new paperwork and said they wanted him to testify again, and he said no. So they sued Musk in October to try and get him to testify. But his lawyers advised against it and said last month the SEC's pursuit of Mr. Musk has crossed the line into harassment. Well, there have been many years of animosity between the SEC and Musk, who's the owner of X, Tesla and SpaceX, since 2018, when he tweeted he had funding secured to take his electric car maker private. That also led to a shareholder lawsuit. But ultimately, Musk was found not liable for misleading investors. Well, Tesla is still the world's most valuable automaker. But now Musk is being compelled to testify again about Twitter. All this at a time when the company is $13 billion in debt and is losing advertiser revenue. Caroline Malone in Washington for DD India.
The Indian Minority Foundation in London organized an event to celebrate India's achievements under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This event honored the significant contributions of the Indian diaspora. The event also included the UK launch of PM Modi's book titled Igniting Collective Goodness, Man Ki Baat at 100. Now, this event was attended by the UK parliamentarians across party lines, diaspora leaders, who praised the dynamism as well as the vision of the Indian Prime Minister.
What I've seen from Prime Minister Modi, he really energizes India, he energizes the relationship between the UK and India. He really is powering ahead to not only be one of the world's leading economies, but a driver towards helping in the developing world as well. I saw the digital public infrastructure, MOSIP, that has increased the number of Indians with bank accounts from 8% only a few years ago to 80% now in record time. And that can only happen through imagination, innovation, but dynamism and energy. And Prime Minister Modi has really helped drive that.
Now let's tell you what's happening across the world. The streets of London are dressed up with dazzling seasonal decorations ahead of Christmas. Tourists and locals are spilling through the streets of the British capital to do their holiday shopping. Carolers, too, are singing in Trafalgar Square, bringing in the festive spirit in the city centre. Ukrainian engineers dug anti-tank ditches in Chernobyl exclusion zone near Belarus border. The works directed to bolster Ukraine's defensive line. They have been underway for some time along Russia and Belarus border. A teenager from Britain who was found in southern France after disappearing 6 years ago is expected to return to his family in northern England. Alex Batty disappeared at the age of 11 during a holiday in Malaga in Spain in 2017. Concerns over ineligible voter cards, blocked campaign planes, as well as delayed electoral lists, and all these raising doubts about the legitimacy of the December 20 presidential elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo. South Korea's northern mountain areas were blanketed in a thick layer of snow on Friday, while local governments mobilized efforts to remove snow. The central and northern mountains of the Gangwon province are expected to receive up to 30 centimeters of snow by Saturday. Still to come here on DD India Live. Oman's Sultan Haytham bin Tariq arrives in New Delhi on his first state visit to India. Speculations rife in Japan over the fracturing in the ruling party's cabinet as the Premier Fumio Kishida faces a trust deficit amid financial scandal. And Indian benchmark indices, the record run continues. Sensex and the Nifty continue to hit fresh lifetime highs. Sensex crossing 71,000. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Mark Lynn. The Sultan of Oman, Haytham bin Tariq, arrived in New Delhi on his first state visit to India. He comes with a high-level delegation of senior ministers and officials. The Sultan of Oman will hold bilateral discussions with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and will also host a luncheon for the visiting Sultan. The visit will further reinforce the long-standing friendship and cooperation between India and Oman and strengthen bilateral ties. Media reports in Japan are questioning whether the ruling party is fracturing after Prime Minister removed 4 influential members from his cabinet this week. Now, the 4 belonged to the powerful Abe faction of the party, which is being investigated for allegedly skimming up $500,000 in kickbacks This is from fundraising events. Chris Gilbert reports from Tokyo.
Well, media here in Japan are questioning if this hasn't been the worst week for the Prime Minister in his 2 years at the wheel so far. He is facing discontent inside his own party. He is facing discontent amongst the public and in the media anyway. The sharks seem to be circling, questions being asked and reports if this isn't the early signs of the end of the Kishida-led administration. Starting right at the beginning, there is a group inside the ruling LDP, the ruling party called the Abe faction. This used to be led by the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and it's the most powerful group of lawmakers inside the ruling party. But this group has been linked and is being prosecuted and investigated for allegedly skimming off the top of fundraising efforts to the extent of tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, the proceeds of which were sprinkled throughout allegedly members of that Abe faction. And so the Prime Minister, in response to clean shop, has kicked the members of that faction out of cabinet. There's 4 of them: the Chief Cabinet Secretary and the Minister to Trade, Agriculture and Internal Affairs. However, this hasn't swayed the public yet. The latest Gigi poll saying that the Cabinet's approval rating and the Prime Minister's approval rating is around 17%. The Prime Minister doesn't have good approval ratings at the best of times. They usually hover between 23 and 30%. 17 is a record low, and his disapprovals are about 58%. Now, this is important because in about 9 months' time, the Prime Minister is facing a renewal of his leadership of the party and his continued time as Prime Minister. Political scientists have been telling me here in Tokyo that he had wanted to call a snap election before that time to refresh his mandate that way. But with polling this bad, they say, the LDP could only bleed votes, and it could only make the Prime Minister's political position even more dire. So questions remain going into the holiday period here in Japan about the political fortunes for next year and how the Prime Minister and the LDP is going to clean this mess up. Chris Gilbert in Tokyo, reporting for DD India.
And now news from the South China Sea. The Philippines is preparing for a potential conflict with China, with plans to repel Chinese forces boarding the Philippines' vessels. Tension between these two countries, the tension has increased because of clashes and standoffs in this disputed area of the sea. Now, the Philippines has accused China of aggressive as well as dangerous actions. Patrick Falk reports from Singapore.
There has been an increase in hostility between the two sides in recent weeks, and perhaps it comes as no surprise that the Philippines is planning ahead for it. A senior military official has said that includes the scenario, as you mentioned, of Chinese forces boarding Philippine vessels. It's something that they say that they've been training for in war game exercises because the Philippines will not allow that to happen. They also said that they are considering what other coercive actions the Chinese might take. They've seen water cannon, they've seen ramming, and now they are questioning what other steps China could take short of an armed attack of any sort. Now, that will be a concern to America in particular. It has repeatedly said that it will defend its treaty ally, although the Pentagon said recently that that does not extend to unsafe operations like the firing of water cannon and like collisions. But if it goes any further than that, then it could really be a test for how far Washington's support for the Philippines goes.
India's key stock indices are at their record highs. On Friday, the Sensex had crossed the 71,000 mark, and the Nifty too had topped 21,300 mark. Led by IT and metal stocks, the markets were poised to maintain that upward trajectory, fueled by a dovish stance from the Federal Reserve, hinting at a potential rate cut in 2024, a series of them, in fact, coupled with the decrease in U.S. bond yields, as well as favorable domestic factors. That's been going on for some time. India's upgraded GDP forecast, wins in the elections for the ruling party, and also lower global oil prices. But the Asian markets were also trading higher. They traded higher, taking the cues from Wall Street. So it's up all around. Japan's Nikkei and South Korea's Kospi were looking at increases. Australia's shares had hit a 4-month high, and all this because of the Federal Reserve rate cut outlook possible next year. To prevent congestion at Indian airports in the future, the Union Minister for Civil Aviation, Jyotiraditya Scindia, assured that manpower, X-ray machines, departure entry gates, check-in counters and immigration counters have all been increased, and they compared to last year, that is, and the government has also expedited the rollout of innovative technology solutions such as Digi Yatra to ease the experience of the passenger.
Digi Yatra is working across 13 airports in India. Those 13 airports cater to almost about 85% of our domestic passenger traffic. We've had 35 million downloads of Digi Yatra app. 91 lakh times the Digi Yatra app has been used by passengers to either arrive at particular airports and board planes. In the next phase, which is in calendar year 2024, we are going to take up first 14 more airports that we are adding on to Digi Yatra. And in the second phase, 11 more airports, so a total of 25 more airports in calendar year 2024. So from our current 13, that number will go up to 38 by the end of 2024.
The Viksit Bharat Sankalp Yatra reached block Vijaypur Panchayat Vijaypur of Samba district in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. School students presented cultural performances, while the beneficiaries of various government schemes shared their stories in their own words under the Meri Kahani, Meri Zubani program. Some cricket news, and Indian skipper Surya Kumar Yadav produced 100 to help India win over the Proteas. India registered a comprehensive 106-run series-leveling win over South Africa in the third and final T20 international. Surya Kumar's 100 came of 56 balls, and Yashasvi Jaiswal hit a fluent 60 of 41 balls, carrying India to 201 for 7 after the visitors were asked to bat first. Then the Indian bowlers managed to get the better of their South Africans, bowling good length, and they bundled the South Africans out for 95 in 13.5 overs. Kuldeep Yadav took 5 for 17. Ravindra Jadeja picked up 2 wickets. Now both the teams will be locking horns in the one-day internationals next. That's happening December 17. That's all we have in this edition of DD India Live. Let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and now also you can connect with us on Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. My name is Mark Lin. From all of us here in Delhi, thanks very much for watching DD India Live. Namaskar.